have a race weekend under my belt, and I've been to the track again in the new kart, so I've got a little bit more experience. I now feel like I feel like I've had enough experience in both a new and used kart to give all you newcomers some advice to start your karting journey to make your life a little bit easier. And the advice I want to sort of give to you, at the end of the day, it's your executive decision on your choice, but I want to sort of just give you some pros and cons on whether you should buy a brand new kart or buy a second-hand or used kart as your very first kart to start karting. Now, I have an opinion on this, which is that you should buy a used kart, so that way it's cheaper and you get the experience, so that way you have an upper hand when you end up eventually needing a new chassis. You got all this experience, and so you almost pretty much off rip know exactly what you're doing. That's pretty big, and a lot of people don't have that, so if you do, you have an advantage right there, because you know how everything works. You're looking at this kart, and you know everything about what it's doing and how it's working. And so that makes it significantly easier to fix things when things end up going wrong, which eventually at some point or another they will. The main reason why I'll give you like a main reason why you should buy a used kart or a brand new kart, and then it's sort of just your choice at the end. So the main reason that you'd want to buy a used kart, I would think the biggest reason is the cost. It is significantly cheaper, to the point that it's even like less than half of the cost of buying a brand new car. I spent $7,500 on it, which is on the upper end, but it guarantees that you get a good kart because it's a Kart Republic chassis, and Kart Republics are the big hit right now. Everyone in the Australian Nationals has a Kart Republic. It's like 85% of the grid has a Kart Republic chassis. Everyone's running it. So the biggest way that you know that a chassis is doing well is if, like in the national or international championships in karting, if a particular chassis is used by the people, for example, in the podium, or like someone who was like last year's champion, or is used by almost the entire grid, chances are it's probably a pretty good chassis. Now, to be fair, my kart isn't a Kart Republic chassis It's not the original. The original Kart Republic chassis has different decals and different paint, but an FA kart is essentially just it's owned by Fernando Alonso because it's called an Alonso kart. That's why it's Fernando Alonso kart. But it's built by Kart Republic, so it's essentially exactly the same kart with a different paint job and different sticker pack. That's the only difference, basically. It's the same kart, just it looks different. That's the only thing. It just looks different, but otherwise it's the same kart. So that costed $7,500, and I bought my used Tony kart for $2,000. So, like, what's that? Like a quarter, almost? I think it's almost exactly about a quarter. Nearly a quarter of the cost. So up front, immediately, the cost is significantly cheaper. However, most likely you're going to be spending a lot, like in segments, but more consistently. You're going to be spending a lot of money as you've got a used car. It's older. Things may end up going wrong, and they will go wrong sooner than if it's brand new. So you might have to spend more money immediately. So it's cheaper in the short term, but in the long term, it's probably going to be more expensive than a new car. Whereas a new car, you spend heaps of money up front to get it brand new, and then you usually going to be spending less money immediately afterwards because it's brand new. Really, it's just the main thing about whether you want a used car or a new car is the experience factor and the cost. So if you literally cannot afford a brand new car, then you've got your answer for you already. You just buy a used car. Because it's fair enough. A new car is very expensive. It's perfectly fine to justify buying a used car because you just can't justify spending $7,500 in one go. That's fair enough, honestly. And you do have to be careful because obviously the price like I bought mine for $2,000, and that was a speedway kart, so it means it'd been raced on the dirt, and that was in pretty rough shape when I got it, and that was $2,000. So imagine if you spend less than $1,000. Imagine if you spent like $800 on a kart. If $2,000 gets you a dirt raced kart that doesn't start anymore, what does $800 get you? So you do have to be careful. But if you do a little bit of research and you talk to the owner of the kart, then you can figure out the history of it and what condition it's in, and then you can figure out, is it worth the price? Should you buy it, or should you move on to the next kart and see what you reckon? So that's with used karts. Whereas with a new kart, essentially, you don't get the experience of restoring it, so you don't really know like what's happening underneath, like what contributes to everything working. So if something goes wrong, you're just gonna pay someone else to fix it instead of you actually knowing what's wrong with it and being able to diagnose it and fix it yourself, which is really important. You gotta be able to know how to do that, especially for a race weekend. Like, if you're pitted with a race team like I was, that isn't necessarily a problem anymore. But if you're not, like you can't afford it, or you're just not because you want to be by yourself, perfectly fine either way, doesn't matter. Whatever your reason is, it's fine. And if you are by yourself and you don't know what's wrong with your kart, you might just miss the whole weekend because you're spending the whole time trying to figure out what's wrong with the kart, you know? So I would say getting a used kart, not just for the price, but also for the experience, is actually a better idea. Because, like, yeah, you spend more money constantly having to fix it, having to buy new parts if you can't restore something because it's just way past its expiration date. Like, there's just no salvaging the part, then yes, you got to buy it new. And it might be a bit difficult to buy it new, depending on where you are. It could actually be quite tricky. So all these sort of things go into whether you should buy it new or used or not. But for the vast majority of people, I would say that buying your very first kart, if you want to get into karting, buying a used kart is definitely the go, because it's cheaper, you get the experience on it, and because it's a cheaper used kart, if you do end up getting into a crash and writing it off, you wouldn't feel as bad as if you just bought a brand new kart that's got an hour of track time and then you write it off in a crash. So you definitely feel a bit less bad. And me, I never wrote off the Tony Kart. The Tony Kart's perfectly fine. It's just, like, I'm going to go sell it to someone because I can't use it anymore. And so I want to sell it to someone who wants to start karting, but either they can't afford a new kart or they want, like, the experience of a used kart, so that way they can learn on something easy and something that's relatively easy to manage, and it's all sort of just there and ready for them to go. And then they can deal with the shock horror when they realize that they either got to pay someone to build it or they got to build it themselves with no instruction manual for a brand new kart, which is definitely a bit of a shock at first. Like, yes, you can figure out your way around it without too much difficulty, but there are parts of the kart, there are bits of it that are a bit tricky without the instructions because there just are none. So it's definitely tricky, but you can figure it out. It's not too hard, especially if you have a picture of, or if you have a reference or you have a picture of some sort of a constructed kart, then you can figure it out pretty easily. But even still, there are some forms of, like, deductive knowledge that will get you pretty far. That some things you need more than just that, but there's a lot of the major things on a kart, like deductive reasoning, you can figure out exactly where it goes. So yeah, essentially, if you want to have a sort of more relaxed and easier start into karting that will allow you to get more experience with a slower, non-competitive kart, most likely, because it is used, it's older. But it'll give you more experience and it's also cheaper too. But it will give you more experience and will allow you to be able to, you can take it apart and figure out what's going on with it, because most likely things are going to go wrong with it more frequently. It gives you a lot of experience taking things apart and figuring out what's wrong and how a kart feels with certain symptoms that mean that something's wrong. And you can then, if you get a new kart and at some point you feel the same thing, you can remember, oh yeah, that's what happened, and you check that, and lo and behold, it might just be the very thing that's going wrong. And then you'll be very, very happy that you got that used cart a while back, because you were able to pick out that issue immediately before it became a bigger problem, which is a very, very big deal, because things will cause more damage the longer they're left unchecked or unfixed. Unfixed isn't really the right word, but if they're not checked and fixed, the longer they're left alone, they're going to do more damage. So if you can catch them immediately, that's a big bonus, especially for a new car, because you really don't want that to get in trouble because it's brand new. You just got it and it's already having something going wrong with it because you haven't done this or done that. It's not amazing. You would strongly prefer for that not to happen. So being able to catch it early because you have experience with it with a used cart is a big bonus. So yeah, that's essentially my idea with it all, is that yes, you should absolutely get a used cart, and then when you're ready, like you're ready to compete, for example, that's when you should start thinking about getting a new chassis, because then you'll actually be competitive, and especially if you have a new engine as well, you will be competitive. And well, maybe I certainly wasn't, but that was conditions that I put myself in, but also things that I couldn't avoid, that all in all left me in a very uncompetitive spot, and so I couldn't really put up any great results. As far as the numbers go, in terms of experience, it was invaluable, but pure numbers, it was a pretty lackluster performance. That's probably what's going to happen on your first race, but you're giving yourself the best chance if you got a new chassis and new engine. But at the same time, if you don't have the experience needed before using that new kit, you might end up quite overwhelmed or scared to push the limit. Whereas if you've practiced with something older and maybe a bit slower, then you're gonna feel more ready and more capable, so that when you do get into the fast new rocket ship, you will be more comfortable and you'll be quicker to the limit, your lap times will be faster, and you will be more competitive. So yeah, that's my personal opinion on it. I hope you all found this video useful. I know it is a bit of a long one, but I do appreciate you all for sticking around. If you did, if you skipped through, then yeah. Anyways, so thank you all, everyone, for watching, and I hope you all found something useful from this, maybe, or you just, even if you're not watching this for the actual guide, if you're just watching it for entertainment, either way, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.